Comments for our officers, just let me know. Thank you. Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public who are in attendance and those who are viewing live streaming tonight's council meeting. I declare this meeting open at 6:02. My name is Councillor Julie Williams. I'm the Mayor of Darebin City Council. I'm also tonight's chairperson's meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's council meeting. This meeting has been scheduled by hybrid and it's also would like to any councillors, I believe we were going to have one councillor, but it's Councillor Demetriadis was going to be online, but she is now running a little bit late and will be coming in physically. So that live stream will be recorded and it'll be made available to anybody who'd like to view it on the website as soon as practical after the meeting. Before we commence tonight's agenda, I'd like to introduce you to councillors. I have Councillor Suzanne Newton, Councillor Gaetano Greco, Councillor Tom Hannon, Councillor Tim Lawrence, Councillor Trent McCarthy, Councillor Lena Messina and Councillor Susan Rennie. Our officers, I have Peter Smith, our CEO, Tanya, Rachel, Kylie, Vanessa, Anna and Bobby this evening. I do not have any apologies at this point in time. Disclosures of interest. Yep. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that we gather here this evening and pay our respects to the Wurundjeri, the Warrawong people, for their continuing connection to the land, water and culture and their connection to elders past, present and emerging. So, councillors and officers, do we have any conflicts of interest this evening that you'd like to declare?
No.
Yep, Peter?
Through you, Mayor, just to declare an interest but not a conflict of interest in item 9.6. The report notes that I'm attending a conference on behalf of council, so that's an interest, but I'm advised it's not a conflict of interest.
Are there any other officers or councillors with any conflicts? If not, I'll move on. Councillors, could I please have a mover for the adoption of the minutes at the previous council ordinary meeting on July the 24th? Councillor Rennie is the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCarthy. I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? And that has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, as we have an occupational health and safety responsibility to ensure that anyone attending tonight's meeting does feel safe, physically and emotionally. Public question time we'll move on to. I will allow 30 minutes for public question time, and if we exceed that time, I will ask for a procedural motion to extend question time for another 30 minutes. In line with Council's governance rules, no question will be taken from the gallery unless they have been submitted prior to 12 p.m. today. You will have a maximum of 3 questions that you can ask, and you have 2 minutes to speak on those. Questions relating to notice of motions or petitions or urgent business items, they will not be accepted in accordance to our governance rules. For members of the public who have registered to ask questions in person, I will call your name when it's time. If you do not respond, then I would take it that you are not in the gallery and one of our officers will read out your question on your behalf. The relevant General Manager will then provide a response to your question. If you are in attendance this evening and you are in the gallery, I would like to invite you up to the lectern to state your name and your suburb and you can ask your question. Any like-for-like questions, depending on the person who's put their question in first, it will be in that person's name. However, if there have been other people who have asked similar questions, they will be accumulated together and combined with the response under the liked questions for the first person who put and submitted their name first for that question. So we'll move over to question time. Do I have Jacqueline in the gallery this evening? Jacqueline, would you like to... Yes, Jacqueline Saunders, correct. Jacqueline, would you like to step up? Just state your name and your suburb, please.
Jacqueline Saunders, Reservoir. Okay, good evening. My first question is, has council installed surveillance devices which have facial recognition and number plate recognition capabilities in the Darebin council areas? Question two and three are related to the same question. Question 2 is, if so, what is the purpose of such surveillance? And question 3, has Darebin Council sought the views of residents about the installation of such surveillance cameras and equipment? Have you informed the residents of its purpose and the financial expenditure for the installation of these devices? Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. You can sit down. We'll have our officers to respond to that. I have Rachel responding to the first question, second and your third question. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the questions, Jacqueline. We've received and responded to similar questions at a recent council meeting, and so those responses are in the minutes on the public record as well. Council doesn't use facial recognition technology or number plate recognition technology in our activities or operations. What we do use is a range of photo and video technologies such as CCTV cameras in buildings, body cams worn by some staff, or dash cams on some enforcement vehicles. None of those activities use facial recognition or number plate recognition technology. The main purposes of using those camera technologies is for safety and security, or for enforcement activities which rely on collection of evidence. And in terms of consultation, Council hasn't recently consulted community about the use of particular technologies. We do have a surveillance systems policy, and that's really designed to make sure our practices align with the state and federal government obligations that we have. It's available on Council's website as part of our approach to making that sort of information transparent.
Thank you, Rachel. Vasilos in our gallery this evening? If not, then I will hand that over to Anna, who will ask your question on your behalf. Vasilos, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Vasilios has 3 questions. The first is, what was the amount of ratepayers' money that was spent to send councillors to the ALGA National Conference? What percentage of their trip total cost was paid for? And thirdly, will council be reimbursed a percentage of the cost of travel by councillors that attended a political party dinner on ratepayers' money?
Thank you very much for your question, Vasilios. We will go over to Vanessa, who will answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions today, Vasilios. Council paid for 4 councillors and 1 officer to attend the Australian Local Government Association Conference between the 12th and the 16th of June. Council's total cost for the conference and connecting with government officials was $14,687.93, and that included airfares, accommodation and the conference registration. During the trip, productive meetings were held with several senators and advisors to discuss and advocate for council priorities, and the Mayor's statement presented at last month's council meeting provides more detail. So as per the convention across the local government sector, council fully funded councillors and an officer to attend the conference and to lobby for council's advocacy priorities, and an estimated 500 councils from across Australia were in attendance. Council funded the costs associated with official ALGA events and meetings, and councillors were responsible for planning their own activities outside of this agenda.
Thank you, Vanessa and Vasilios. Do I have Sam Bolton in the gallery this evening? No? Anna, are you able to ask those questions on behalf of Sam? Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Sam has 3 questions. The first is, can the council provide an update on the progress of further investigations of traffic calming to improve cycling and pedestrian safety along Kramer Street West since deciding not to proceed with the proposed pinched points on 26 April 2021. Second question, can Council confirm the exact route proposed for the strategic cycling corridor along Kramer Street outlined in the City of Darebin Strategic Transport Framework Plan? And finally, can Council provide an update on its advocacy for a new pedestrian crossing at Elizabeth Street and Raymond Street?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Sam, for asking those questions. Over to Vanessa, who will answer those questions. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you for your questions, Sam. The Your Street, Your Say project for the Group A area, which includes Kramer Street West, did not prioritise any treatments for design and delivery for that area. And this is due to the effect that the James Street road closure has had on reducing traffic volumes, and also a planned speed reduction down to 40 kilometres per hour, which will be delivered this year. It is intended to engage the Preston West area as a part of the Group A projects again in the next 2 years. And I can confirm that all of Kramer Street is on the strategic cycling corridor. And regarding the advocacy around Elizabeth Street and Raymond Street, the crossing, it does continue to be an advocacy priority for Council. And we've been advised by the department that this project has been added to a pipeline of projects that will be considered for development funding in the 24 and 25 financial year.
Thank you, Vanessa. I have Belinda Lloyd. Is Belinda in our gallery this evening? If not, I'll ask Anna to ask her questions on her behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Belinda has 2 questions. The first is, how many patrols of Edwards Lake to ensure dogs are on lead have occurred since the last council meeting? And of these, how many have resulted in a fine being issued? And the second question, when will increased and improved signage be implemented at Edwards Lake for dogs to be on lead?
Thank you. I believe I have Vanessa as our officer who will be answering those questions.
Thanks, Belinda. The local laws team have increased park patrols since the end of July. So there have been 37 patrols to date, including one that was undertaken today. No infringements have been issued at this stage, but several verbal warnings have been issued. And we've observed that the levels of compliance have increased due to the increased presence of local laws officers at the park. So we will continue these patrols as well as our 7-day-week animal management compliance services that we provide for the community. And so regarding the signs, I can confirm that 9 new signs are going to be installed at the site this week, and the locations have been identified by our local laws officers in conjunction with our bushland management team, and will also include the Edgars Creek wetland that's just immediately north of Edwards Lake.
Thank you, Vanessa. Our next questions we have is from Harry. Is Harry in our gallery? No. Over to you, Anna, to ask Harry's questions on his behalf. Thank you.
Harry has 2 questions. The first is, a number of years ago, Council had a meeting at the Bowls venue and a commitment was made to put a speed hump across Raleigh Street at the intersection with Victoria Road, similar to the one at Clarendon Street. When will that be constructed? And the second question, the storm water drain on Raleigh Street at the intersection with Victoria Street continually blocks when there is heavy rain. Thus, it causes a large lake. Can the drainage gate be enlarged and the pipe be replaced?
Thank you. Vanessa will answer the first question, and then I have Rachel who will be answering Harry's second question. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for your question. So Splitter Island was identified as an option through the Clarendon Area Local Area Traffic Management Study in 2019. The Your Street, Your Say program is currently investigating transport need for this area, And this program will identify transport construction priorities, and I'll have an officer contact you tomorrow so that you can follow that project and participate in the next round of consultation.
Thanks, Harry. In regards to your drainage question, we'll follow this matter through and respond to you directly. Officers have conducted a preliminary review of the drainage network at the intersection of Raleigh and Victoria Streets. They've observed that there are both council-owned assets and Melbourne Water main drains at this location. So we've registered the issue. We'll need to conduct some further investigations to understand the nature of the problem and the root causes. We would certainly welcome your offer to send photographs. That will help with our investigations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa and Rachel. Do I have Carmen in the gallery this evening? Carmen Mascot? If not, Enna, if you can kindly ask on behalf of Carmen her questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Carmen has 3 questions. The first is, what are the full implications for ratepayers and residents of council declaring a climate emergency? Please include monetary costs as well as loss of freedom for further restrictions for residents. The second question, will this likely include increases in fees, charges and rates? And lastly, can council categorically declare that the declaration of a climate emergency will not lead to travel restrictions, road closures, increased fees or rates, increased surveillance, further parking restrictions or restrictions in private vehicle ownership or use?
Thank you, Carmen, for your questions. I have Vanessa who will be answering all 3 questions to answer your questions. Yeah, thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your questions, Carmen. There is no cost to declare a climate emergency. Responding to the climate emergency remains a priority for Council, and this is why continuing to lead with our response to the climate emergency is one of the 10 big actions in the Council plan. This year, funded actions include the Solar Saver program at $200,000, finalising the climate emergency plan at $30,000, and a number of operating initiatives which has an allocated budget of $30,000. So fees, charges and rates are developed and considered through Council's annual budget cycle, and community engagement is an important part of this process. A broad range of factors are considered when setting the budget, and in June this year, Council adopted its revised 10-year financial plan. You can read this by visiting our website. The 2016 Darebin Climate Emergency Declaration has not directly led to travel restrictions, road closures, increased surveillance, further parking restrictions, or restrictions on private vehicle ownership. And the declaration has not directly led to increased rates, fees and charges, but as I noted above, Council does allocate budget to deliver climate initiatives. The climate is changing, and we will continue to experience increased extreme weather events like bushfires and flooding. When an emergency like a flood occurs, deploying the emergency management plan may require roads to be closed and restricted travel for a temporary period of time to ensure that we keep the community safe.
Thank you very much for your questions, Carmen, and to our officers. The next item that we have, which is actually a like-for-like question from Nina Kerr, James Shrudd and Catherine Rouse in relation to the river gum tree at La Trobe University. I will call Nina to read her question, which was received by Council first, and our officers will respond on behalf of those questions, but those also which will address the questions both submitted by James and Catherine. So, Nina, if you're in the gallery, kindly step up and just state your name and your suburb. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Nina Kerr and I work in Thomastown. My first question is, why hasn't Darebin City Council made the planning application D2852023 to remove the significant pre-European tree at La Trobe University campus open to the public yet, considering 951 people as of today, most of who work and live in Darebin and study at La Trobe University have signed a petition to save this tree, and the planning application was first lodged on the 3rd of July. My second question is, why wasn't the planning permit application made open to the public, public notice in the first place? And a question from Jim is also, does the council know that there was no proposal to protect this tree, as La Trobe University's arborist report only explored options, the option of transitioning this tree to a stump, which would remove the vast majority of the tree's benefits and values? Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And James and Catherine. I have Vanessa who will be responding to those questions. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions, Nina, and also to James and Catherine. As the Mayor's mentioned, because some of your questions are similar, I'm going to answer them all together. Council has not yet put the application on notice, and this is because we're waiting on further information. After we received this information, the application will formally be put on notice. The public can lodge a formal objection to the planning permit application any time and up until when a decision is made, and applications can be lodged now. And the petitions that Council has received have been lodged as applications, as objections to the application. While Council is yet to be notified of any application for listing the River Red Gum on the National Trust's Register of Significant Trees, if asked, Council will consider any application in line with its Council Plan commitment to regenerating, enhancing and protective ecosystems and biodiversity. And regarding what Council is doing to protect the tree, this tree and many others are already protected through clause 57.17 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, which applies to native vegetation removal. This is a standard provision within all Victorian schemes. And as the responsible authority, Council will consider the planning application in accordance with the scheme. And in addition to that, Council's local laws protect significant trees, including this tree. Earlier in August, La Trobe University announced that following Honeywell's application for a planning permit from Darebin Council to remove the tree as owner of the land on which the tree is located, La Trobe has denied permission for the tree to be removed, and you can read this statement by visiting the news section on La Trobe University's website.
If you have further questions from the gallery, I'm more than happy for our officers to respond to you tomorrow, and they can get your details if that's possible. They may already have it from your submission, and that they can contact you if you have any further questions. It's just very echoing coming from the gallery. Thank you. I'll move on to the next person. I believe I have Angelique. Is Angelique in our gallery this evening? Angelique, could you kindly step up and just state your name and your suburb? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angelique Matias. I live in Reservoir. Thanks for answering my question tonight. What are the plans for improving the interaction of council members and the local community into your meetings? Currently, there is no adequate debate and is limited to submitted questions. This generally leads to the community members feeling shut down and disappointed. And a subsequent question, you are currently only allowing community members who submit questions to be included in the council meetings, which does not show your commitment or inclusivity to the local citizens. Is this going to change, and if so, when?
I'll have one of our officers to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm responding. Thanks, Angelique, for your questions. I'm going to respond with one answer. We've collated that together. Our meetings are run in accordance with our governance rules, which were adopted following community consultation. The practice of submitted questions is standard practice across the local government sector and enables and enables officers the opportunity to gather information to provide responses to questions from the community at the meeting. Everyone is welcome at our council meetings, which are also live streamed and promoted through our website and social media. Thank you for your feedback, which will be taken into consideration during the next review of the governance rules.
Also, Angelique, I'd like to actually respond to, you're more than welcome to have a meeting with myself and we can have a discussion over any issue that you want to discuss, or if you want to involve a councillor, I'm happy to meet with the ward councillor or any other councillor at the same time, or community members. I'm happy to come to your street and speak to people in your street also. You're more than welcome. I have the next person is Serena. Is Serena Mealy? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My first question is, please clarify whether finalisation of the acquisition of 3 parcels of land within Clements Reserve is contingent upon discontinuing Blenheim Avenue, which is situated in the park. Now, I know that it's on the agenda tonight, but I'm asking the Mayor to exercise her discretion to allow that question because it's not directly related to the agenda item.
Yes, no problem, Serena.
Do you want me to ask the rest? Okay. Second question is, now that negotiations between the Department of Transport and Darebin Council have been completed for 3 parcels of land within Clements Reserve and consistent with Council's transparency obligations, can you please disclose to the community the sale price of the land? And the third question is, during a site meeting in April 2023 between Friends of Watgambo Park and Darebin Council staff, we discussed the need for infill planting around the playground this season to replace plants that had failed. Can you give a progress report on this planting? Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. I have one of our officers who can answer that. Rachel, thank you. Will respond.
Hi, Serena. Thanks for the questions. So firstly, no, the finalisation of the acquisition of the 3 parcels of land from the Department of Transport and Planning isn't contingent on discontinuing Blenheim Ave. In terms of the negotiations and disclosure of the sale price, I need to clarify that the negotiations aren't yet formally complete, and so I'm not yet able to share that price. The latest update is that Council has received the draft contract of sale from the Department of Transport and Planning, and that this document is currently being reviewed by Council solicitors. And lastly, in terms of the planting in Watgambo Park, the team have scheduled infill planting for the next 2 to 3 weeks. To meet the need for hardy vegetation at that site, the plan is for several appropriate Indigenous species to be planted in clusters.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you, Rachel. The next person I have is Sean Middleton. Is Sean in our gallery this evening? If not, then I'll ask Anna to ask his question.
Thanks,
on
Mayor.
his behalf. Thank you.
Sean has submitted 2 questions. The first is, opposite 262 Wingrove Street, Fairfield, on council-controlled VicTrack land, fake grass was set up for a number of years with Darebin's full knowledge, as it was reported to Darebin a number of times. The fake grass has been removed, but the area is now a dust bowl. Can Darebin please provide a timeline on when the area will be rehabilitated after the fake grass allowed by Darebin was removed? And the second question was included terms that could offend or trigger members of the community. The question related to whether Darebin promotes high-level advice or engagement to groups that use notorious figures or groups outside of the historical context, such as for comedic effect.
Thank you, Sean, for your questions, and thank you, Anna, for reading out his questions. I have officers, Rachel, who will respond. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean, for the question. I'll respond to the first question and then one of my colleagues will pick up the second. So in regards to the land opposite 262 Wingrove Street, the majority of that land is owned and managed by VicTrack, and VicTrack are the best contact point to discuss improvements on that land. Council does have a small section currently under its maintenance control. In regards to that section, given that the site's level, safe and accessible, we don't have current plans to do other rehabilitation works at this point in time.
Thank you, Rachel. I have Tanya who will answer the second part to that question. Thank you.
Thank you,
Tanya.
Mayor. We understand that this question relates to a recent post made by a small community group interested in protecting the Preston market. Council's only alignment with this group is its well-documented commitment to ensuring the market is protected as a thriving fresh food market.
Thank you, Tanya. John Nugent, I've seen you in the gallery. Would you like to step up and ask your questions? Thank you. Okay, I need to ask for an extension of time. Councillors, Councillor Messina moving, Councillor Lawrence second. For all those in favour? Thank you, that's been carried unanimously. Apologies, John, over to you. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. I was going to ask Councillor Messina, does she feel it in the air yet? Okay, Mayor Williams, could you please
Collingwood
advise...
supporters, I don't know.
Could you please advise why are all the customer service areas closed over the Christmas period? From previous questions asked at the council meeting, there is sufficient staff to keep the Preston customer service area open over the Christmas period. Closed the minor customer service areas, Breswell and Preston. The question is, why should ratepayers and customers be disadvantaged over this period just because it's a quieter period?
Thank you, John, for your questions. I have Tanya that'll be able to respond to those questions that you've submitted. Thank you.
Thanks, John, for the questions. I'm going to answer as one. Our customer service centres close for the main days between Christmas and New Year period, which are traditionally very quiet times. While our service centres are closed, our call centre remains operational, where customers and ratepayers can process payments, access information and submit requests. Our website also provides a range of self-service options for the convenience of our customers.
Next question. Thank you. Mayor, could you please advise why no junior clubs were given any free lights or upgrade at Donath and Dole Reserves, only senior clubs received them?
Thank you, John. I have Kylie who will respond to that. Thank
Through
you.
you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, John. Unfortunately, we'll need to take the question on notice, but we'll come back to you as soon as we can. Through you, Mayor. Not tomorrow, but I understand there's a meeting scheduled for the week after.
Get an answer. Can I finally get an answer to the question that has been asked several times before? When will the residents, customers, and their questions from the floor be asked without submitting their questions prior to the council meeting?
Tanya, you're able to respond to that one?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you again, John. As has been answered in a previous question, our meetings are run in accordance with our governance rules, which are adopted following community consultation. The practice of submitted questions is standard practice across the local government sector and enable officers the opportunity to gather information and provide response to questions from the community in the meeting. Everyone is welcome at our council meetings, which are also live and streamed and promoted through our website and social media. Thank you for the feedback, which will be taken into consideration during the next time we review our governance rules.
Yep, no problem.
Over 10 months, it was a council officer stuffed it up, and people can't really get up now and ask questions from the floor.
Because okay, as you know, you and I have a meeting tomorrow, but the main issue is that when when somebody from the gallery comes and stands up and asks their question, not only they ask their question, they start making statements and they start, I guess, ruling out other things that are just not relevant or is not a question. And that's why I have people like yourself that come in and we sit down and we talk about these questions. And as I said, I'm more than happy to involve officers, which, as you know, I do, and we sit down and we go through those questions and answers with you. Yes, I'll do that tomorrow. Thank you, John. I appreciate your time coming this evening.
Thank you.
The next person I have this evening is Annette Sinclair. Is Annette in the gallery this evening? If you can just step up, state your name and your suburb. Thank you, Annette.
Hi, Annette Sinclair, Reservoir. I would like to know if the councils are aware of the prices of Reservoir Leisure Centre doubling since the 1st of July. What can the council do about these extreme changes? And the third one is, I'm sure there are other properties in the same position and I feel something should be done. And when will you take responsibility for the rubbish in the area? That sounds strange, doesn't it? Because you've taken the guts out of my question when I wrote the question first. I put the background in, and now you're saying I can't put background in. So the question is, really, what I asked, I've noticed a lot of rubbish lying around our suburb. It's looking more and more like a ghetto. It seems our council has lost interest in keeping it tidy. On the corner of Seston and Kirby Street, there's a pile of rubbish on the property, and more is added weekly. The property belongs to the Housing Commission. It's an eyesore and needs to be cleaned up. And I'm sure if I had rubbish on my property, I would be sent a message from the council to clean it up, fined, or asked to put temporary fencing. There is also a house in Kirby Street that has rubbish on their property, which is a health hazard. Goodness knows how many rats live there, and is a fire hazard. And if an ambulance needed to attend to the woman living there, there's no access for them to reach the door, and that's a health and safety matter. This property has been like this for 5 years at least, and the woman told me the council told her to clean it up then, but it hasn't been cleared up. And I can understand the woman has anxiety problems resulting in her hoarding, but there must be some social worker that can assist her to clean up the property. Surely the council owes it to the rest of the neighbours of the street and to her to act responsibly for her sake. I'm sure there are other properties in the same position, and I feel something should be done. And will it take responsibility for the rubbish in our area? And when will you take the responsibility for the rubbish in our area? I believe the council is responsible. So that is the question. I'm sure there are other properties in the same position, and I feel something should be done. And when you take the responsibility for the rubbish in our area?
Thank you, Annette. Over to Kylie, who will answer and respond to those questions. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I'll answer the first two questions, and thank you for the first two questions, Annette. For the past 2 financial years, Council applied a further 50% price reduction to some of the concession fees at RLC, and that is in recognition of the impact of the pandemic on our community. Those concession fees have now returned to their normal discounted price, which is why it is showing an increase. But there is still a discounted price. It's just less than what it was during the...
Okay, thank you. We will not have any further comments from the gallery while our officers are responding to your questions. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll hand to my colleague Rachel now.
Hi, Annette. In regards to the rubbish, certainly council has quite a few different ways that it tries to help deal with rubbish in the community. Depending on whether it's on the nature strip or whether it's in someone's private property, we have different approaches that we use. One of the really helpful things that our community can do is tell us about specific things. So we don't see all of it every day. It's really helpful for you to report particular issues to us through our customer service centre. We've obviously got the details in your question today. We'll follow those two sites that you've told us about through. But I would invite you or your neighbours, if there are others that you're worried about, to let us know about the specific sites so that we can follow them up. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. As you've probably heard the response, it's a very sensitive and growing issue amongst elderly and residents that are obviously struggling with mental health issues also. My next person I have is Nikki. Is Nikki in the gallery this evening? If not, I'll ask Anna to ask her
Thank you,
questions.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Nikki has 3 questions. The first is, which particular legislation, rules or regulations allow Darebin Council to go beyond the rates cap and charge a separate public waste service rate? The second question, how is the above discriminatory rate justified, not charging it in respect of properties that are over a particular value? And the third question is, when will Darebin Council be audited by external auditors so that residents can get true transparency and accountability?
Thank you, Anna, for reading out Nikki's questions. Over to you, Tanya, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Nikki, for your questions. Darebin's waste charge has been established in accordance with the Local Government Act. There is some good information about how rates caps work in Victoria on Local Government Victoria's website, and this includes what the rates cap covers and what it doesn't cover. Question 2, council can only charge a waste charge to properties that receive a council waste and recycling service. And question 3, council is audited annually by the Victorian Auditor General Office.
Thank you, Tanya. That is all for this evening in reference to question time. So we'll go straight in. Oh, there's one more. Apologies. Won't be a moment, Louise. It's my fault. I've missed a page. My apologies, Annette, who is not in the gallery this evening, is that right? Yeah, there's Annette Calbarbera. And are you able to read out Annette's question?
Okay, I can read those out, sure. So there were 3 questions from Annette. Why are developers being allowed to not adhere to the Planning and Environment Act in regards to not correctly advertising or notifying neighbours? The second question, why are Darebin Council arborists not consistently following Australian standards in tree protection and structural root zones and deferring to what the developers will agree to in considering planning permits? And thirdly, statistically, I would like to know the number of questions that have answers deferred and successfully answered as promised.
Thank you, Anna. I have Vanessa who will respond to the first part of the question, and Rachel will respond to the second part of that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette, for your question. All developers are required to comply with the requirements under the Planning and Environment Act.
Thank you, Annette. It's one of my teams that are our arborist team. I'm aware that you've got a concern about the way a particular planning permit application was reviewed by Council's arborist. that matter has been subject to a full investigation, which the GM of City Sustainability and Strategy has contacted you about. I'm confident that the case was thoroughly reviewed by a senior and independent arborist and that they considered the appropriate standards and applicable requirements. I do understand that the outcome of that investigation isn't what you were hoping for. Certainly our aim is always to be consistent in how we apply the relevant standards. I would say if there are other matters you have concerns about, please let me know so that we can investigate them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. I'll reach out to Annette and I'll speak to officers to make sure that that is actually carried out. And there was a third question for Tanya to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Annette, for your question. The majority of public questions are answered on the night, and those that are taken on notice are documented in the minutes of the following council meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. And that is all for question time this evening. We'll move on to submissions. Council's governance rules permit members of the public who have registered to make a submission, we will invite to come forward one by one to address council in relation to matters that are listed on tonight's agenda. We have one submission this evening. And in reference to petitions, we'll move on to that. If there are no petitions this evening, do we have any petitions? No. All right. So, councillors, we'll move on to the agenda, and I will be permitting questions of officers prior to the commencement of the debate on each item. The first consideration of this evening's reports is community complaints about a councillor policy. As we have one submitted this evening, Serena Emili, if she would like to come up as she has registered this evening to speak, you have 2 minutes to speak in reference to your submission. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you, Mayor. My response is in 3 parts. So, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the additional changes to the draft policy following my submission at the last council meeting. And these include ensuring an assessment of the complaint by a councillor conduct officer, submitting the complaint to the principal councillor conduct registrar if it's considered to have breached the standards of conduct, ensuring that members of advisory committees are considered to be members of the public and non-employees for the purposes of the policy, and where there's a prima facie case of alleged misconduct, council delegating the mayor to make an automatic referral to an arbiter in the case of alleged misconduct or to a conduct panel in the case of alleged serious misconduct. These are all fantastic changes which significantly improved the policy. I just want to point out some editing issues in the investigation box. There's elements of the misconduct point duplicated in the alleged serious misconduct point. I can draw someone's attention to it after the meeting. And in the transparency and fairness box, the header sentences have been dropped into the dot point list, making that section of the policy hard to read. So that's just an editing correction. The substantive issue I need to raise is the issue of the 3 months for misconduct and 12 months for serious misconduct in terms of lodging a complaint. It's not clear to me whether, I don't know how to express it properly, but if I lodge a complaint to council, does that start the clock ticking, or is it when that complaint is lodged to an arbiter or a councillor conduct panel? Is that when the clock starts ticking? Because at the moment it is not clear in the policy that the person making the referral must make it within the timeframes that are set out in statute. So I just wonder if there could be an amendment to make sure that these things are handled in the policy. I'm sorry, I don't have any words to put to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have Peter, our CEO, to answer to that one. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, there is an alt rec tonight. The intent is it's 3 months from when the alleged, or 12 months from when the alleged behaviour occurs. The complaint must be made within 3 months. So essentially, which is in line with the Code of Conduct.
Is it 3 months to the council or 3 months to where it's referred?
So if you make a complaint, I'll get this right. The intent is there's a clock ticking on when you have to report the behaviour to council. That's the intent. So I think council, there's an alt rec tonight through you, Mayor. It may be that you council at a fourth point and amend the office rec to give me editorial authority to make that clear and adjust the editorial issues that our submitters presented to you tonight. You might want to add that so that I can make that clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Serena. Councillors, we'll move on to our item this evening, which is the community complaints about a councillor policy.
Thank you. I'd be happy to move that with the alternative officer's recommendation, including a fourth point that I think Peter is working on now.
Okay, do I have a seconder in reference to that? Or Councillor Lawrence, do you have a questions? This is question time also. So, because I didn't allow, yep, you want to second it? No problem. Okay, so I have Councillor Newton as the mover and Councillor Lawrence as a seconder. We do have a fourth point that we will be putting up on the screen shortly. So maybe we'll just wait for that so at least all councillors know what we are voting on, if that's okay. Okay, so we're just having some technical issues. Considering that the fourth point is not really going to make a difference in reference to the intent of what this policy is about, would you like to have your time to now speak on the item, Councillor Newton?
Just about to come up.
I'll just wait for it to come up. Thank you, Mayor Williams. So this is quite an important policy in my view. So we have had informal ways of, if a community member wants to make a complaint about a councillor or councillors, but what this does is give a lot of clarity about what needs to happen if a community member or an advisory committee has witnessed behaviour that they think breaches the Code of Conduct. So I will acknowledge the submitter. So I've had similar questions about how this will work in practice. So point 4 that's just been added is authorises the CEO to make minor editorial amendments to the policy to provide clarity as required. So in my understanding, the thing that we need to figure out is if a complaint is made about 3 months prior by a community member, our council processes can take up to a month to get resolved, in which case it's possible after that the mayor and deputy mayor can raise a complaint to the registrar. So the issue that does need to be resolved in point 4 is whether that means that the complaint will take on that whole 3 months or whether it will be down to 2 months, the clock ticking as the submitter said. So I think that's important to make sure that we get right. But the good thing about where this has landed is we've spoken to the seniors clubs with the Italian community and the Vietnamese committee. We've had the opportunity for people to tell us what they think about this policy. We've made some changes as a result. I think where it's landed is pretty good. The 3 months for misconduct and the 12 months for serious misconduct matches what's in the Act and what we do as councils with the complaints policy. And I would encourage community members and advisory committees, if they do see behaviour from councillors that is unacceptable, that they do use this policy. It is there for that purpose. And I'm glad that we are finally recommending it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, Mayor Williams, thank you for that. Yes, so this is a new direction for the council, and it certainly evens up the community dialogue and the expectations and accountability for residents, just as councils have enjoyed a process through the PCC. So I'm not sure what's happening in other councils, but I certainly welcome this policy, and obviously it addresses the issues about accountability back to our ratepayers and residents.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillors? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, in relation to this policy, I think it's long overdue, and I think it's much welcomed, and it should be welcomed by all councillors. Like I said, it's taken a while. I've been on council for a while now, and I haven't seen such a thorough policy come through in relation to the community making complaints against councillors. There have been times where community members, justified or not justified, have had complaints against councillors, but there hasn't been a proper mechanism in order to guide that complaint to a satisfactory outcome that is both objective and also respects the complainant, but also respects the person or the councillor on which a complaint is being made up against. I think as councillors, we hold public office, we're elected. It shouldn't be once every 4 years that the community can either vote us in or vote us out. There should be accountability along the way, and I think this policy will provide for that. I think it must be emphasised that this policy is a complaint not in terms of the positions that councillors have in relation to particular subject matters, but more in relation to, specifically in relation to their behaviour as councillors and whether their behaviour is proper in regards to the community. I certainly welcome this policy, and I think we all should hold ourselves up to public scrutiny. The other protections, obviously, in the policy are in relation to vexatious issues or frivolous issues, and I think we have to. There'll always be situations between community members and councillors where they don't get along, but as long as we can remove the vexatious issues and deal with more substantive issues, I think this policy is worthy, and I'm hoping that it gets unanimous support.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any other councillors would like to speak on the item? If not, I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? And that has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9.2, 2022-23, the Q4 performance report, which is non-financial, ending for the 30th of June 2023. Councillors, do you have any questions in reference to this item before we start the debate? If not, do I have a mover on the item? Councillor Hannan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation as up on the screen there. As noted there, this report actually brings together a number of items. There's the Council Action Plan, Capital Works report, report on council resolutions, as well as procurement. There's been a lot of great achievements in this last quarter of the year, coming up to June 30, 2023. And I'd just like to outline some of those. So in the Council Action Plan, which includes the Health and Wellbeing Plan and covers all the work of Council, really, there's achievement of 69% of actions, which it's commendable, but obviously well short of the the total planned actions. It's worth saying, though, that it's not necessarily just about the numbers. We've fallen short in this period and need to keep this in mind as we set and deliver future plans. It should be noted that the plan was reviewed at the end of Q3 to focus on areas of highest priority. And I think we need to be clear with future plans to be both ambitious as well as realistic to changing needs. And things do change over time, for both inside our control and outside our control. I think it's really good that that this report brings together the council resolutions as well as the actions which were put in the plan at the start of the year as the budget. There's over 137 resolutions completed, just to show the additional work on top of the original plan. That represents an 87 completion rate, so it's quite substantial, that additional work that's come up over the year. In relation to capital works, very solid, 79% of works on track or completed, which is no mean feat given the dramatic rise in costs of materials and construction over the period. Procurement, there's a $16 million spend on local business, which is an increase of $4 million on the last year, although slightly reduced as a percentage. Some reductions in percentage allocations to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, young people, gender equity and environmental measures. So this is an area for ongoing improvement. But just to touch on some of the main achievements, there are around 12,000 participants in council-affiliated sport in the last period, an MOU with Aboriginal Housing Victoria with concessional rates for 87 properties, grade 6 anti-racism workshop delivered to 188 students, 21 teachers, 1,000 trees planted in the streetscapes. Something I'm really excited to see in the next period is that community housing project in Town Hall Avenue in the heart of Preston. So there's a lot of really amazing achievements in there, and it's a great credit to the reporting team as well as to the whole organisation, and I commend this report for Council's endorsement. Thank you.
Great report. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak on the item?
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Hannan's covered some of the key highlights, so I won't repeat those. I do want to recognise the work of parts of council, though, that have been both recognised and reflected in this report, which sometimes we don't realise are happening because they engage with particular cohorts within our community but can have a big impact. So it's some of those actions that are directed and well directed in certain places but sometimes don't get the public attention that I think they deserve. Councillor Hannan mentioned before about council's work around procurement, and I want to highlight that in this report you have a fantastic ready reckoner in terms of council's performance when it comes to creating opportunities for people with disability, particularly for people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, for apprentices and trainees, and of course for people who are experiencing other forms of disadvantage or disconnection. We prioritise organisations through our procurement process to partner with and to fund when we can deliver aligned outcomes, and you see great examples of that in here as well. So that's one of the things that's not flashy, but it's important, it's significant. I also want to highlight that we have seen some important growth through council's sports clubs, supporting over 12,000 people across the previous year, 2022 to 23, and a 3% growth in that period. Importantly, and I would like to see these figures grow, and I know council has a policy and a target to do so, almost 3,000 of those participants were women and girls, so that's getting closer to the 25%. But we've got a target that goes back over a decade now of getting to a 40% figure from memory. So we are well beyond where we were many years ago, but we still have some way to go. And I would just recognise the work of the World Cup in generating a lot of interest for women and girls. Has demonstrated that councils, governments of all levels need to continue to invest. I'll end it there and congratulate the organisation on a good report. Still work to be done, and thank those who have put it together for us as well.
Councillors, are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor, and it is a great report in terms of the contents, but this council, 9 councillors came together to deliver a council plan 3 years ago. And I want to highlight something because it's important, because I'll be using it in the chamber for debate moving forward. I'm sorry to do this, but there are two items that are very dear to the Darebin community that we have not addressed. And there is a deferment, and we know why that deferment is, because it's actually been detailed. The first one is the activation of Edwards Lake Boathouse and Reservoir. I look forward to it coming in the chamber and look forward to the development of that and where it is, because our community is eagerly awaiting where that's been. This has not been the 3 years of growth. This has been is at council, prior council terms, for more than 6 years. I'm waiting for that to continue to be delivered and to be looked upon. I'm sorry, I need to elevate that because I think it's really important to our community. We failed on delivering the Darebin Chamber of Commerce. When you look through the report, it talks about a lot of things in the business community that we have not addressed, yet this council put in a lot of money in that economic development, and I feel that we have let that down, and we've also let down areas of businesses when it relates to cultural diversity. I need to highlight that because I don't want to kumbaya some of the things that we've let our community down on.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak on the item or against? Okay, I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. The next item that we have on the agenda is 9.3, which is the draft borrowing policy. Councillors, do you have any questions to our officers in reference to this item? If not, then I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Hannan, do I have a seconder? Councillor Greco. Thank you. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'd like to support the officer's recommendation up there on the screen. It's pretty simple, that we basically endorse this policy and adopt it going forward. So a borrowing policy is part of our commitment to good governance. It sets out the principles of when council will and won't borrow funds in the future. Borrowing is part of Darebin Council's long-term financial plan and enables us to achieve our strategic goals. However, obviously it comes at a cost, and each loan needs to be assessed for its benefits and risks. As we know, interest rates have increased from almost zero in the last 12 months to now more than 4%. And this has real impacts for council, just as it does with anyone with a mortgage or a business loan. It's also important to consider that Darebin Council actually has power in the money that we loan and pay back to financial institutions, and we can use this to support social and environmental outcomes. So this policy sets out a clear purpose for and limits of when we will borrow, and sets out some parameters or guardrails of long-term and short-term indebtedness ratios, which are in alignment with Darebin Council's approved risk appetite. For example, borrowing will be considered for major capital works, especially when there's a revenue-raising component, or for dealing with emergencies, including infrastructure required to address the climate emergency. And importantly, it's not to borrow for regular operating expenditure, which needs to come from our regular revenue. It does, as the recommendations say there, report feedback from the Audit and Risk Committee. My understanding is that the feedback was, some comments were largely for clarification, which have been dealt with. There was a specific question regarding under what circumstances the council may choose to deviate from the policy. So it's really important to be clear here that the policy is not a mandatory policy under the Act. It's a policy that we as council are setting for ourselves. But we take it very seriously, and the indicators within this policy align to the risk management policy that we have set for ourselves. So any new borrowings would need, any major borrowings, significant borrowings would need to be subject to consultative engagement as part of the annual budget process. So we would need to be very transparent and clear with ourselves and our community if we intended to go outside of this policy. So it's a commitment that we make to ensure our own long-term and short-term financial sustainability. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannan. Councillor Greco?
Thank you, Mayor Williams, and thanks Councillor Hanna, who gave a good overview of the policy. This is a new policy. If it's endorsed tonight, it will replace an existing policy. I believe that the policy that we have before us tonight is much more articulated and I think much clearer in terms of setting out what the aims and objectives of our borrowing policy should be. It's important to note that councils, as with many other organisations or even households, need to borrow. Borrowing is not a bad thing. If you think of many of us would have had a mortgage in terms of paying off our own homes, and so it gives organisations, as it does, it gives individuals the capacity to acquire extra funds that then will be repaid back over a period of time. And the policy goes into that in terms of what the intergenerational benefits are in regards to what we borrow against, and that's something that clearly needs to be articulated and needs to be part of any borrowing intention of the council. The other thing that's important to note is that it's a rigorous policy. It's gone through the Audit Committee, and the Audit Committee has made some firm suggestions in relation to the interpretation of certain terms in the policy, and they have been clarified in order to provide as much clarity and as much transparency as possible in regards to the policy. And I'll just finish on this note. This council has an ambitious capital works program into the future. Many of our assets are either dormant, not used, or need to be replaced in the future. So having a robust borrowing policy will enable us to borrow for those types of asset renewals or new assets into the future. And the one that I'm particularly thinking about is the Reservoir Leisure Centre. A council will not have the capacity to borrow for that upfront, and will need to pay for that upfront. Will need to borrow for that into the future. So a policy like this will be really apt. Thank you.
Thank you. I did allow you to go a little bit over time then. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak on the item? If not, then I will put the item to vote. All those in favour? And that it's been carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, I have 9.4, which is the declaration of the special charge, the Solar Saver Round 4.2, batch number 2. Councillors, do you have any questions to our officers? If not, then I'll ask for a mover. Councillor McCarthy, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. So as councillors would be aware, we do need to put these solar saver batches through the chamber because they involve the declaration of rates, and it's great to see that we continue to see interest in solar saver. In this case, we obviously need to declare a special charge as part of this process, and one of the critical things, and I think this is important to recognise, is that we do have a good return through this process on council's upfront investment, which is why we continue to see strong interest. In this case, we have a target of 150 installations set in the council plan, and in this case, we have 33 installations that will be delivered through this special charge declaration. The value of this, in this case, is $224,000, so it is a significant investment, but we do know that we see that return both in terms of benefit to those households, but also benefit to emissions reduction through the work of the Solar Saver program. But I just want to highlight why we do this program again. It is because we are serious about taking action on energy equity and energy poverty, and we know that the people that benefit and the households that benefit most from Solar Saver are those who are most likely to experience both heat stress during summer and are reluctant to use air conditioning units and the like to keep their homes cool, and those who may experience other forms of stress during winter, such as the freezing cold, and are less likely to turn on heaters. Solar Saver, in combination with other technologies, delivers a solution that means that people feel safe to use their appliances, don't feel like they're going to spend a fortune, and can do so and can engage in keeping the home hot or cool as is required without feeling like they're going to burn through their weekly income. And we know the energy prices are going up continuously, and this continues to deliver a solution for those households. So I commend the work of our officers and of the continuing results that Solar Saver delivers, and look forward to seeing more panels on more roofs. Thanks.
Thank you. And to our seconder, Councillor Rennie. Would you like to speak on the item?
Apologies, no, Councillor McCarthy's covered it very well.
Okay. Any other councillors would like to speak on the item? If not, then I'll put the item to vote. All those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I have 9.5 this evening, which is property matters, sale of minor assets. Now, we have two very different sale of properties this evening, so I'm still going to ask for one mover and one seconder and take this in parts. I will need, as I said, one mover and one seconder for both parts, so that one mover and seconder will carry over for both of them. However, when we are voting, we'll be voting on them separately. So I'll be asking for two separate votes. In reference to speaking, you can only speak once, and so please utilise your speaking time, or you may just want to speak only on one of those items. Okay, so councillors, do we have any questions in reference to this item before we go into the debate or ask for a mover? Councillors, do you have any questions in reference to this item? Okay. Can I kindly please ask for a mover and a seconder in reference to Clements Reserve and Kelvin Grove? Councillor Rennie as the mover. Do I have a seconder in reference to this item? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. These property matters are quite different one from the other, not only because they relate to different parcels of land in different parts of the municipality, but also because there's obviously very significant community interest in Clements Reserve and what happens there, but also just in terms of the stage that these are at, in terms of how we go about sale of land assets. So in the first case with Clements Reserve, this motion signals the commencement of a statutory procedure. And in the second case, relating to 9 Kelvin Grove, this motion signals the completion of a statutory process. And I think that's important to understand, in fact, as the most significant matter relating to these. In order for council to dispose of a parcel of land or to otherwise make changes to roads or discontinuing a use of land, there has to be a statutory consultation process which enables community to have a say and provide feedback, and if community actually wants to come and speak to us, often a hearing of submissions process. And so the discontinuance of road within Clements Reserve will result in that kind of a process, and it will come back to council at a later date following that public notice period. And, you know, I very much encourage people who have an interest in Clements Reserve and the way in which that property is managed and future use of that property to participate. With relation to Kelvin Grove, which is a laneway in the ward that I represent, this is a pretty standard, straightforward matter in which an owner of an adjoining property has expressed interest. It's been through those statutory processes and now coming back to us for endorsement. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, Mayor Williams, thank you for that. Yes, in this chamber we do deal with a number of these change use items. In particular in Reservoir, the whole issue of laneways has been a huge amount of change. Originally, the blocks were done much bigger and had no laneways. Then many of the blocks were then land given for laneways for servicing of blocks. In regard to Clements Reserve, it's very similar to Central Creek grasslands in that we had a vision to put residential buildings all the way through that area onto the creek almost, and including on BNAC Street above there, which we recently, about 6 years ago, gave up that, the council rezoned that residential back to parkland. And then we had a freeway reserve, and then the community was able to enjoy, like on Central Creek, a freeway reserve and a natural park. With Central Creek, it was a massive undertaking to actually excise private roads and council roads and rezone them and take them back to a new development, and also the creation of 2/3 of that area created as the grasslands that we know today. In this case, the discontinuance of the freeway along the Darebin Creek, done many decades ago, I think about three state members ago, what led to the fact that the Vic Roads had acquired streets and this small residential blocks with a vision to put a big freeway there. So it's taken a long time for it to come back. It's been a long process. I know people are frustrated that one level of government has to pay another level of government to get back park that we're already using, but that's unfortunately the modern government, and I look forward to this proceeding and consolidating Clements Reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any other further councillors who would like to speak on either of the items? All right, if not, then I will put the first item to vote, which is Clements Reserve. All those in favour in reference to Clements Reserve? That has been carried unanimously. And the second item, which is Colvin Grove, I'll put that item to vote. All those in favour? Thank you, and that has also been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. (9.6), we have our governance report for August 2023. I'd like to state that our CEO will note of his interest in reference to this item, and also that the officer's recommendation has put in an amendment regarding Councillor McCarthy, who has been elected to the Board of Climate Emergency Australia. So you might want to declare your interest, but it's not a conflict.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just note my interest in this. I am attending a conference for council. I will provide on my return a report to councillors around how learnings will be applied at Darebin.
Mayor, if I can also just not declare a conflict but an interest, given my name's mentioned in relation to that recent appointment as well. So I'll stay in the chamber.
No problem, thank you. As for those who are viewing, that this is not a conflict of interest but an interest. Councillors, do we have any questions to our officers before we start the debate on this item? If there are no questions to our officers, then can I kindly please ask for a mover? Councillor Rennie, and do I have a seconder? Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. As we all know, and many of the community members who are regular attendees at our council would know, the governance report is a standing item on the agenda, but every month there's something different and worthy of noting. This month, I think it is worth noting that we've got the quarterly expenses for councillors for people who are particularly concerned about councillor expenses and transparency. This is where it's all noted down, and every community member has an equal opportunity to see how much it has cost to have elected representatives and the different expenses that they've claimed. I think there's a significant level of transparency in this, but given that there was a question during question time today, I think it's worth noting that this is a very good place to look for that information. Also, in the interest of transparency, I think it's worth drawing to people's attention that the report notes several findings of the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal that has made determinations in relation to councillor, deputy mayor and mayoral allowances, and that consistent with inflation there have been some increases in those, the most recent of which will not take effect until the 18th of December. And for those who are interested, the amounts of remuneration that we receive noted. I would like to congratulate the CEO on the invitation he's received to speak at a conference. I think that is, really fantastic for Darebin to have that profile in an international setting, and I'm sure that we'll all benefit and learn from the information that Mr. Smith brings back to us. Of note also, I think it's particularly worth drawing people's attention to the fact that through this report we are resolving to cancel the planning committee meeting that would have ordinarily been held on Monday the 11th of September, and that's because there are no planning permit applications listed for that planning committee meeting. I think we'd all realise that we've seen a significant change in the number of planning permit applications coming to council. One of the reasons for that is we're simply not seeing as many planning permit applications that are triggering the number of objections that I think we had in the past. And it's probably a reflection on both the slowing of those permit applications, but potentially also an acceptance within the community that we are seeing growth and that it is part of the course that planning applications occur in local communities. I don't think the rate at which we're calling in applications has changed significantly. We're just not seeing as many come to us. So those are items that I particularly want to draw people's attention to tonight. I think it's an interesting report and I commend it to you all. Thanks to the staff who prepared it.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Over to you, Councillor McCarthy. Would you like to actually speak on the item?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be really brief. Just wanted to highlight the range of committees that are always covered off in this report, but I think we don't often mention the amount of work that goes into the governance of this organisation, not just in this chamber here, but also the various community advisory committees that we have that sit, where we have volunteers that come together often with councillors and council officers and contribute to the thinking of the organisation. I want to mention that because we did have questions in the chamber this evening which I think were around how does the community get involved in council's processes. I would hate for anyone to think that this is actually the only place where that occurs. In fact, in our community advisory committees, and you can see the range of some of those in this report here, and the number of people that are involved in those processes, that is where a lot of that deep engagement in specific issues actually occurs, whether it's around animal management issues, whether it's around sustainability, whether it's around disability, whatever it might be, council creates those spaces and people are welcome to nominate for those opportunities and those positions when they become available. So I just encourage anyone who is interested in getting involved in local government. Now is a great time to look at those opportunities as we start to think about renewing advisory committee appointments at some point, or calling for new members in some committees at some stage in the future. So just wanted to highlight that, and also just to thank the officers for all their work in putting together this report. It is comprehensive, it is transparent, and if we've missed something, we want to know so we can get it in there for the next one. Thanks.
Mayor, with your indulgence, I had meant to congratulate Councillor McCarthy on his appointment also. I was reading off my report, which is different from the recommendation above, but having congratulated Mr Smith, I feel it only fitting to note that as well.
Noted, thank you. Any other councillors like to speak for or against the item?
I was
Councillor
actually
Messina?
going to say that as well. I think it's really fantastic that Councillor McCarthy gets to lead that, so congratulations. But also, it's really exciting to see the CEO of Vibrant Darebin Community is invited to speak to a festival, because I know how committed he is committed to the connection between people and places.
And I also echo those comments. Any other councillors? If there are no further councillors who like to speak for or against the item, then I'll put the item to vote. All those in favour? And that has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. If there are no items to be tabled this evening, so I'll go straight to our notice of motions on 11.1 on e-scooters. Councillor Newton, as this is your notice of motion, you'll be moving the item this evening. Thank you. Do I have a seconder in reference to this item? And
Sorry,
it's up
Mayor,
on the
can I just clarify that you're moving it with that amendment, Councillor Newton?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Peter.
That's okay. Councillors, do I have a seconder in reference to that? Councillor Rennie? Councillors, do you have any questions in reference to this item before we start the debate? I'll give you a moment to read the notice of motion, which is up on the screen. Is that a hand I saw there?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. I'm just checking, just in relation to point 4, I'm happy that the names of the relevant companies are removed and keep it neutral from that perspective. Just to understand, probably more in relation to point 3, is it's correct, just to confirm correct, that councils are able to engage in their own hire schemes? That is now the case with relevant providers. So is it an open market, I suppose, is my question here. And do we know what the other M9 or Northern Region councils are doing in this space? Do we have any information in that space, or would this report, based on what we have in front of us, deliver us some information about that?
Thank you. I'll have one of our officers to respond to those questions. Thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Vanessa?
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCarthy. Through you, Mayor Williams, yes, we would do a lot of that, provide a lot of that detailed evidence and advice to you. I do understand that the initial state government trial has opened up, and other councils we do now have the opportunity of considering participation, and officers are exploring a potential joined up or shared approach across other M9 councils.
I'd like to ask a question. So who makes a decision on exactly where the e-scooters are placed in the municipality?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Williams. That would be something we'd explore in the report, but we would approach it like we would, exploring introducing any new service, which would involve working with stakeholders and considering if it was something we would need to consult with the community on.
Through Mayor, I probably can answer that based on the Port Phillip trial. So that's generally decided by the operators in consultation with the council. And it's also generally driven by demand. So, a popular spot is where the operator would want to locate those scooters. But if the trial was to proceed here similar to Port Phillip and Melbourne and Yarra, I know under those arrangements it's decided in consultation, but generally by the operators. So they move the scooters around to meet demand.
I have another question. Considering we've had a bad experience previously regarding bikes and that were found in lakes and on top of street signs, who collects those items?
Thank you, Mayor. The providers of the scooters would be required to remove scooters if they were put in an appropriate location.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other questions that you'd like to ask our officers before we enter the debate? If not, then... Councillor Greco, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had a question just in terms of the time and resources and effort that will be required in producing such a report, and then what would actually lead off from that report.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Greco. So we'd estimate it would take around 20 days, or in effect a month of an officer's time, to do this research and bring it to council. So that could impact existing council plan, action plan projects and other services. The transport unit is quite a busy unit. We consider that March, considering and doing this work in March would be a time where it wouldn't have an impact on the work programs for this year.
In reference, so you're saying it wouldn't impact the council plan, and what about in reference to, financial, that if we decide to endorse it once that report comes back?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So we would, of course, do a lot of modelling on the potential revenue benefits to council. And if a report were to be brought to council in the new year, then council could consider implementing the scheme in the following financial year based on the advice in that report.
Through Mayor, obviously next year is election year, but you will be looking at action plans as part of the planning and budget process ahead of that new council coming in. So there will be a action planning and budget process next year where you're trying to set actions at least that this council can start and then the new council will finish. So bringing the report back in March enables you to consider that alongside other priorities in that planning and budget process.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor Williams, I'm just getting a little bit, I just need some clarity. Didn't Vanessa say it would hinder the council plan?
Thank you, Mayor Messina, for the question.
Councillor Messina, sorry.
Councillor Messina, I do apologise. I do apologise to Mayor Williams. Looking at the work plans that we've just put in place for the year, if officers brought a report in March, I wouldn't expect that to have an impact on any council plan, action plan projects that are to be delivered this financial year.
This financial year, but not next one.
Councillor McCarthy has a question.
Sorry, it's just a question that arose from your question, Mayor. Just to be clear, if council was to receive a report in March, that would give council the opportunity, if I'm correct in what I've heard, to consider this opportunity with revenue raising, with council to receive revenue in the next financial year, or if it wanted to not look at something until the following financial year. So we've got options here, but when we would start, if council was to support something like this, it is an income stream, as I understand it. It would be either next year, 2024-25, or 25-26, depending on when we decided to go.
Yeah, I'll get our CEO who's had this experience at Port Phillip.
Through you, Mayor, if we bring the report back in March, it will include proposed revenue, but that will be gross plus the net cost of implementing it. If you then decided to go ahead, you'd then have to go through some procurement process. In other words, selecting the operators and negotiating with those around how it would work. So probably the scheme would start next financial year and you could build the cost and the revenue to offset some of that cost, depending on how much revenue there was, into your 24-25 plan and budget. So that's why we're saying March. If you bring it in March, from what Vanessa's saying, we could do it in that time frame without having a significant impact on staff resources between now and then. It makes sense to look at it as part of as new revenue for next financial year, and also look at the cost and time taken to implementation alongside other action plan priorities that you might be considering at that time.
Councillor Lawrence? Oh, did you have a question? Councillor Lawrence?
So I just had a small amendment I wanted to propose for the motion to point 4A.
Yeah. So before we go to the amendments, I just wanted to ask, are there any further questions before we enter the debate or make any amendments at this point in time? Question? Yep. Councillor Lawrence?
I'll just explore the subject I was going to do. My question just is, we've noted the report will have safety considerations. Will we also have waterway pollution impact considerations in that report?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for the question. Yes, in bringing this report to you and preparing advice, we would consider any potential unintended environmental impacts by the scooters being left in inappropriate spots. And as I mentioned earlier, it is the operator's responsibility to remove scooters if they're put in a place where they shouldn't be.
Councillors, are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, I have Councillor Newton as the mover and Councillor Rennie as a seconder, and Councillor Lawrence has an amendment. Did you want to go to your amendment? I do want to speak, sorry, Councillor Newton. You have 3 minutes to speak on the item. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There are so many opportunities for cities such as ours to give residents, workers and visitors access to micro-mobility options to travel through our city easily and quickly. E-scooters have been trialled successfully at 4 Victorian councils over the last couple of years: Melbourne, Port Phillip, our neighbouring Yarra Council and the regional city of Ballarat. The trial's just been extended and now every council in Victoria has the opportunity to enter into an MOU with a company to have e-scooters available for short trips in our city. One clear reason why I think Darebin should be part of the next stage of the trial is that there's clear demand that we should be catering to. When I ride home, I often see e-scooters at the border of Yarra and Darebin, particularly just before the Merri Creek when heading north along St George's Road, and at the Merri Creek Trail where Yarra Council ends and Darebin begins. As an inner suburban council with fantastic strip shopping, live music, arts, culture and sport, and fantastic trails such as along St George's Road and Merri and Darebin Creeks, there's a huge opportunity here to add another option for people to travel short distances through our city. When I think about how they'd add benefit, I think about something like the 86 Festival, where on Super Saturday, Darebin's live music venues will come alive with one street, one day, 40 curators, 40 venues, 200 acts, all free, with High Street being the street with the most live music venues in Australia, and many visitors attending Darebin for this event. Patrons can easily and quickly hop from one live music venue to another by e-scooter to maximise their ability to see different musicians and acts across Darebin. The City of Melbourne recently passed a unanimous motion supporting their ongoing operation of e-scooters for hire in their city. Lord Mayor Cap described it as a phenomenal success, and I think this is important. They will roll out designated e-scooter parking zones in the coming months. So when we get a report, we can find out if that's something we should do as well. It was also agreed by the City of Melbourne to plan for a wider shared e-scooter trial across inner Melbourne with the M9 group of councils: Darebin, Hobsons Bay, Maribyrnong, Melbourne, Moonee Valley, Marybeck, Port Phillip, Stonyton, Yarra and the MAV. So this is something that will be rolled out across many inner city councils in the next year or two. And this is all part of a trial by the Victorian State Government to find out how safety will be incorporated into micro-mobility devices into the future. I think this is really worth noting that in the first 12 months of the trial, around 400 tonnes of carbon emissions were avoided as people switched from cars to e-scooters. And operators say the trial has resulted in a $270 million economic contribution to the city, with fewer than 2 hospitalisations per 100,000 kilometres travelled. In terms of safety, I would argue that being part of a trial and being able to provide feedback to Vic Roads about what we find would be a valuable use of data. The time to do it is now, because this is the first time that the state government has allowed Darebin and any other council to be open to a trial. And as the council representative to the Metropolitan Transport Forum, I know how much interest there has been in this topic. So what we don't want is for places like Marybeck to have a trial, but for people not be able to go from somewhere like Brunswick to Northcote or Thornbury, because Darebin doesn't have a e-scooter program. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Lawrence? Well, I'll ask the seconder. Would you like to speak on the item?
I'll reserve, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence? I thought as much. I apologise.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Williams. Is it appropriate time for me to move that amendment I foreshadowed in terms of point 4A? That simply between the words safety and considerations, we include the words and waterway pollution considerations. That's enough.
Does the mover and seconder accept that?
Yes, I think that's a good addition.
And the seconder?
I'm keen to understand whether Councillor Lawrence intends to support it if his amendment is accepted.
I think he can't say that until we enter into the debate.
Yeah, that's how I would take it.
Then no, I don't accept it.
Okay. Councillor Lawrence, do you have a seconder in reference to your amendment? Councillor McCarthy will second your amendment. Councillor Lawrence?
Hasn't.
Yes, I'll just talk to the amendment. Yes, I have had the opportunity to be doing community work in Docklands and observe the e-scooters over last year or so, and the enthusiastic use of them is incredible in terms of filling in the gaps from the government-planned city of Docklands and Melbourne City Council. And so it has really got an enthusiastic use. However, there has been some unfortunate things in terms of safety and them laying around on footpaths, etc., which will probably be even more, we need to be more careful given our mobility and our aged people. But the ending up in waterways is an issue that we need to build into any contracts, and we don't want even though there is potential for income for the city on this, we don't want the environmental cleanup of this to distract from what our many cleanups and our work that we have to do in terms of restoring our polluted waterways, urban waterways in this city. So we don't want another shopping trolley scenario. So that's why I raised that, and there has obviously been in the press some specifics of this, but around Docklands it has been something concerning residents and community that council resources are diverted to, dealing with the adaptation. These things, of course, always happen when you introduce a new fangled transport solutions. In this case, it's reinventing something from the 19th century. And adding our new dimension of electrification. But again, I think it's great to look at all this and get a good report back, but let's be very clear-eyed about any offsets because, the resources we should be spending on our waterways at the moment, we know we're not doing because we've got the industrial pollution left over. So we don't want another shopping trolley scenarios.
Thank you. I need to ask for the seconder, Councillor McCarthy, in reference to the amendment, if he would like to speak on the amendment.
I will, thanks, Mayor. And
I'd like to foreshadow, I was going to foreshadow an amendment, Councillor, Mayor Rennie, Mayor Williams.
I'll let the seconder speak and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Messina. Councillor McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I really agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Lawrence's concern about being clear-eyed and open-eyed, which is why I support Council receiving both a report at the right time, but also a report that canvasses what might be the key concerns of both Council, but also key stakeholders. And I'd expect that our officers would look at those issues anyway, because they do have a keen eye on these things. But I think it's good for us to be explicit about something like waterway pollution, because we saw what happened with the e-bikes system that was not rolled out in partnership with local government, in fact was rolled out through a different model, and we were dumped with the problem. Here we have a different situation, and I recognise the Victorian government has taken some really important steps, and I actually applaud them to not rushing in with a statewide or a citywide solution, but in fact running the pilot that they have. And I think they've done the right thing in piloting with those cities that are listed there, but also looking at how to work with more councils like Darebin for a broader solution. I wanted just to highlight one of the potential scenarios that could happen for a city like Darebin were we not to engage proactively in this issue, which is that our neighbouring councils, Yarra, Marybeck, potentially even Banyule and Whittlesea, could engage in this exact trial. We share waterways with some of those cities, obviously Marybeck, Banyule and Yarra in particular, and of course also key waterways with Whittlesea, with obviously Edgars Creek and part of the Merry as well. The key thing here is that we don't have control over what our neighbouring councils do and how they regulate and engage with our sides of the waterway. We only do that through our good partnerships. So I would like to think that we will get not only this report that canvasses the issue that Councillor Lawrence is talking about, but also thinks about how we work collaboratively around issues like that in a proactive way so that we don't end up with the problem. That's why we need this report, that's why that's a good amendment, and that's why I support it.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Before I go to you, Councillor Messina, I just wanted to ask, is it in the foreshadowing, is it to do with the amendment that's already... Yep, okay then, Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Williams, I'm simply going to ask, and I have some wordsmithing here, to refer this notice of motion to the Darebin City Council budget process.
Sorry, Mayor, from a governance point of view, we must deal with the amendment that we already have underhand. That before we can't... I'm allowed to foreshadow. Yeah, but we have to deal with this amendment.
So Councillor Messina, we'll put yours on hold because I actually thought that your amendment was going to be very similar to Councillor Lawrence, but in fact it's very different. So I'm going to go forward and ask if there's any other speakers in reference to the existing amendment, and then if that doesn't get, then we'll go to yours. So any other speakers in reference to Councillor Lawrence's amendment?
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I'm likely to actually abstain on this amendment, and that's because it strikes me as being part of a pattern of unnecessary amendments intended to...
Okay,
I'm talking to my position on this amendment. Part of a pattern of putting up amendments that actually aren't necessary and seem to be intended to undermine the positive contribution that the amendment, that the motion, I think, is making to debate in this council. There's, plenty of scope for the report to deal with these kind of issues under impacts on reducing emissions and congestion. It's an unnecessary amendment. It seems intended to highlight a possible negative side, and I think just to undermine the exercise, and that's why I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Any other councillors would like to speak? Councillor Hannan?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Newton for bringing forward this motion, and to Councillor Lawrence for the amendment. I appreciate and respect Councillor Rennie's position, but on balance, I'm happy to support the amendment. Just speaking to the substantive motion overall, as noted there and by Councillor Newton, there are real benefits for everyday people from e-scooters. They're affordable, they're accessible, they're an active form of transport, they reduce emission and traffic congestions, they're popular, and they're going to increase in popularity no matter what Council decides tonight. There are potential downsides which are dealt with in this motion, and for example, safety issues, congestion issues, and I take that to include the sort of discussion about misplaced scooters on the footpath, etc. So in calling for a report on this, we will get options for consideration on those issues. It is only a pilot. It's run by external providers. It's not run by a council. In fact, it's expected to raise revenue for council, noting the net revenue with costs included. Exactly what the revenue will be, we wait to receive a report, but in some ways it's a question of, well, how early do we want to start making money out of this? As has been noted, the motion only seeks a report. It's, as Councillor McCarthy pointed out, we have an opportunity to take a strategic and coordinated approach here and learn lessons from this, as opposed to just, leave it to see what happens. There's no timeline noted in the motion, but we've heard from officers that it could be accommodated within existing resources in the new year and potentially in the budget for the financial year. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any other speakers in reference to the amendment? We're only debating the amendment right now, because I'll ask for a vote on that. If there are no further speakers on the amendment, I'll ask for the item to be voted. For all those in favour in reference to Councillor Lawrence's amendment, put your hand up. I have Councillor Hannan, Councillor Newton, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Greco, Councillor Williams. All those against the amendment, Councillor Messina, and Councillor Demetriadis, are you abstaining to the amendment? Thank you. And Councillor Rennie, you are abstaining also? Thank you. So that amendment has actually been passed, and it will be added in with the existing item that we have. And we'll go back to the original mover and seconder, and I believe Councillor Messina had a foreshadowing amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, that is to deliberate this notice of motion to the council budget process.
I have Councillor Demetriadis would like to second that. I'd like to ask the mover and the seconder.
Can I ask a question?
Yep, no problem. We're just getting a further clarification of what Councillor Messina wants to do in reference to this foreshadowing item. So, Councillor Messina, your amendment is actually deleting from 1 to 4, and that the item will be referred to the 2024-25 budget process. Is that correct? Okay. Do I have a seconder? Oh, I had a seconder, Councillor.
Can I ask a question?
And yep. So,
Well,
Councillor Newton, do you accept?
Thank you.
I raised a point of order. There is a point of order, and I'll find it. That.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say it. So you have a point of order?
I'm trying to find the relevant note. There is a meeting rule that it can't negate, an amendment cannot negate the substantial meaning of an item. So basically to cross out the whole substantive meaning, I would say, is out of order. So, I actually think it might be better to propose a procedural item if that is the intention.
Through you, Mayor, the councillor's correct, and I probably should have advised Councillor Messina differently. Which is an amendment must not be directly opposite to the motion, I think is what you're looking for.
That's why I asked for some wordsmithing advice.
Can I just suggest we adjourn for 2 minutes, and I'll help Councillor Lena with her amendment so that it fits within the governance rules.
I was just going to say the same thing because we're running pretty good on time. I'm just going to adjourn until 8:10. If that get councillors enough time to... Okay, I did not hear the commentary in the chamber. So if we could please keep all commentary to yourself.
motion at the moment is silent, and when it comes back, right?
Councillors, are we able to please resume to the meeting? It's now 8:10. I need to know where we're at. But I don't know if council. We voted on that, didn't we? That's right. So that's in. Yeah. Now, Councillor Sanders, did she have a seconder? I was cancelling that. That was that's right.
Correct. And now we're waiting on what that will be.
Councillors, I request that you follow the directions of the chairperson. The chamber is a place where councillors have robust statements, and councillors are entitled to make amendments and not making the assumption about a fellow councillor's intent. All councillors have the right to make amendments, and as councillors, we need to listen to those amendments and the debate. I feel that we've lost our way just in the last 5 minutes prior to adjourning, that councillors were making the assumption and making statements and asking where councillors were going to vote. That's not the intent of what we're here to do this evening. So I hope that councillors can settle down and think and listen to each other and not make assumptions. And when I've asked for a councillor to stop, kindly please stop. Thank you. Councillors, I have Councillor Messina that has foreshadowed. Have we got that amendment ready now?
We do, but I'd like to ask a question, if I may, Mayor.
Considering the situation and that we do have time and the difficulty of this particular item, I will allow it.
Thank you. My question actually is through you, Mayor, to the CEO, being the prior CEO of the City of Port Phillip. Can you please elaborate on the revenue and the costs in relation to the trial at the City of Port Phillip, or the e-scooter? Yes, please.
Through you, Mayor, the report will bring back those revenue projections. I can talk from what I know, but with some caution, because I haven't seen the audited financial statements of the scheme, but I can tell you that the revenue is roughly about $1 per vehicle per day, gross. So in Port Phillip, which is very popular for e-scoots because of the beachfront and places like that, the annual revenue is circa $150,000 a year from that $1 per vehicle per day. That's gross, and out of that you've got costs, your initial procurement costs and setting up the contract, and then officer time, both to administer the contract, look after the scheme, and obviously deal with any complaints that come to council. The operators do have their own complaint lines, but some complaints do come into council, obviously. So there is probably about half an officer's time off that gross revenue, and maybe a little bit more, but we'll bring that back in the report.
Thank you. Mayor, I'd like to just make another amendment, please, if I may. Given,
sure.
Receives a report in March 2024 detailing the comprehensive direct and indirect costs to be included. And direct and indirect costs, given that you spoke about gross revenue rather than B. Okay, thank you. Sure.
Yeah, because revenue is brought up in point
now.
B.
Thank you, I see that now.
Yeah, so we'll just rejig that around, and then we'll ask if the mover and seconder is happy with that.
I accept that.
Yes, it's a great addition. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's been accepted automatically, so there's no need to... Yes, both have accepted. So that's now been included.
No?
It's been accepted.
I have to speak to it.
Yep.
I need to make it clear, because I don't think it has been. My concerns are about the council plan that has still not been delivered. And in particular, there are two items that I know very dear to the community, and that is Edwards Lake Boathouse in Reservoir and also the Chamber of Commerce. And I know this is our third year, and we have a process for new ideas. It's called a budget process. This council, this chamber, are very well aware of that budget process, and we have exhausted the budget for this financial year. And we have a lot going on, and not only next year, but the year after. We also have Your Street, Your Say projects that we've undertaken extensive consultation, and these projects are still far away from delivery, and our community is waiting for that. Council also has an in-depth advocacy report, and this council has not delivered a third of that advocacy report. Economics, it just ticks that. But does it tick the proportionality box? Because the e-bike trail probably will be undertaken in the southern part of the municipality, because that's when its most density occurs. Probability, the probability that these figures highlight may some whimsical revenue amount. We can't divert resources to another project, especially new projects that are geared at a new council election. I think that's what this is. I think this is the process of a new council election and a platform moving forward. It's 12 months away. This isn't going to be the only one that's going to come to this chamber, and I think we need to be upfront about that. I'm not saying I'm not supporting it, but I need to see the full facts. Thank you.
Any other councillors would like to speak in reference to this item? Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, Mayor Williams, thank you for that.
I spoke in the amendment. Hang on, Councillor Lawrence, because you... Oh, because it's been
Speaking to the
included.
substantive.
Yep, so you can speak. Sorry, Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, we really do need to get information. It's good to get information early and get information at any time. We do have a budget process, as we know. It really starts in December and with officers, and it goes through to February, and then goes all the way through to June and July, and then we have the consultation with the residents. This, of course, will have to compete with everything else and the public responses to it. I lost a bike path between Reservoir and Bundoora in a budget that was promised in a council plan, 1.6 million, whatever it was. That's another issue that can't be used. Things that were cut can't be used as a counterweight for thinking that things that are emerging. We should be open to things that are emerging. We introduced Solar Saver way before many state governments. Let's get the facts, let's get the pros, let's get the cons. The fact that there's some income on the table is good, and maybe that will actually help alleviate and solve some of the other problems, like the boathouse, which is a big pressing problem.
Any other councillors would like to speak in reference to this item? Councillor Greco?
Thanks, Mayor Messina. Look, Mayor Williams, apologies. I'm happy to support this, particularly with the changes that have been put in there. I think we do need to get some comprehensive revenue projections and also some direct and indirect costs that will be associated with such an initiative. I think that's important because Darebin Council is substantially different to Port Phillip Council and Melbourne City Council. We're a diverse council. I mean, the bottom half of the council lends itself a little bit to Yarra Council, but the northern part of the council is very different to the southern part of the council. So it's important that we get both a revenue projection and also the cost associated with this. I know it could be an exciting project, and usually exciting projects, we usually get carried away with thinking about the project itself, but not then thinking of the financial implications in relation to the project. And I say that on the back of this, and I didn't want to raise this earlier when we were looking at our action plans, but 3 of our action plans are basically being deferred. And that's in relation to the cultural diversity plan. That is something that's clearly been deferred. In relation to the participation of culturally diverse communities, in regards to council venues, that's also been deferred. And also in relation to the increase in the participation of diversity in sporting clubs, from a cultural diversity perspective, that also has been deferred. So I'm hoping that we can do both this, but also at the same time, I'm really cognizant that we've only got about another 15 months, 16 months to the end of our term, and some key council plan objectives have clearly been deferred. So let's hope that we could pull off all these things, but we really need to be cognizant of the cost associated with new projects.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak or against on the item? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm delighted that it appears we're moving towards a consensus on this item. I think it's important to note that nothing in this going ahead tonight and receiving a report in March has any impact on some of the other items that we've talked about, which have been delayed for various other reasons.
Point of order. Sorry, misleading the chamber. I referred to some comments that Vanessa said earlier in terms of the financial impact, and we also had a briefing, I believe at 1 o'clock today, that indicated the financial impacts.
What point of order number ruling?
Misleading, which is G.
False
Number
statement.
10.1G.
Councillor Rennie. I also have to agree that it was a false statement and misleading.
May I ask that you might seek advice on that, because I'm directly going from a comment made by Ms Petrie.
The way I heard it was to say that...
Through you, Mayor, can I just clarify what you believe you said, Councillor Rennie?
Nothing in proceeding with this tonight impacts on those items that have been talked about, like the boathouse and other items, and their deliverability. So we're not getting any less of the boathouse tonight because of this. We're not getting any less of the cultural diversity plan.
I just want to clarify what you said so I can advise the Mayor. I think Vanessa's comments were actually about transport projects and the transport team who need to work on this. So, and I think the councillors are raising other issues that are not to do with the transport team. So I think Councillor Rennie's correct.
It is correct, but I'd like councillors to please not refer to other projects and other agenda items that we've already discussed this evening. I'd like to keep to a positive in reference to this particular item and keep focused on this item.
Thank you, Mayor, of course. What I would like to do is just actually read a little from an article that appeared in the government news just last week. It said the City of Melbourne has backed the ongoing operation of commercial e-scooters within the LGA, as well as plans to establish a shared local government scheme across inner Melbourne. The City has been participating in the state government's e-scooter trial since February 2022 in partnership with the City of Port Phillip, City of Yarra. There have been nearly 5 million shared e-scooter trips since the trial began. It's anticipated the government will permanently legalise shared e-scooters in early October, and council officers are already in talks with other inner city councils about expanding the scheme in anticipation of the decision. The article goes on about the unanimous support for the motion by Lord Mayor Sally Capp to support the ongoing operation of e-scooters. And Councillor Capp describes it as a phenomenal success. These e-scooters are coming whether we like them or not. They're coming and they're going to be in private use, and they're going to be in shared schemes like this where people can hire one. We don't want to be the only council that tonight backs away from that and buries our head in the sand and pretends that we're not, in this universe where this is a new mode of transport. 10 years ago, councils were confronted with the same issue in relation to shared car parks for car share schemes like GoGet and FlexiCar. And people said, oh, we don't know, it takes other car parks. People anticipated obstacles and other things. And yet we got behind it and we did it, and now we accept that they are a necessary and helpful part of the transport system. We have the same opportunity with e-scooters, and I'm really pleased that we're moving towards consensus tonight.
Thank you. Your time's up. Councillors, are there any other councillors who'd like to speak on the item or against? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I wanted to just say thank you to Councillor Newton for bringing this to us in a timely way, because it gives us the opportunity to consider what may be a decision that we have to make at some stage in the future, not through choice but through necessity. And I say that because if we consider how these sorts of schemes tend to operate and how these sorts of projects tend to roll out, and I think Councillor Reddy prompted me to think about what's happened with car share, FlexiCar, those sorts of brands coming to our city, and then us not having the policies in place for how we respond. Here it's a little bit different because there is a potential partnership and commercial opportunity. But there would be nothing worse than for us to find ourselves being the centre of the donut where a scheme is operating all around us and we haven't done the work to work out how we make it work for our residents and our communities. Councillor Greco actually got me thinking when he spoke before about how we can influence this opportunity should we decide to proceed with it, and how do we make it more Darebin and less general. And so I'd like to think that when we go, if we do proceed with this and we sit at the table with potential operators, we talk about Darebin values, environmental, social, our commitment to multiculturalism, our commitment to inclusion, our commitment to a whole range of things which we hold dear, and how do the various operators measure up. I've had a look at the operators that are mentioned in the original motion and others that are operating. Some of them do some really great work, it seems, on paper about creating employment opportunities. We have social procurement commitments. We say if you work with us at Darebin, you need to create opportunities for our community. Some of them seem to do that, or at least talk about doing that. I'd like to make sure that we don't just leverage financial opportunities, but also those other outcomes. So, Mayor, I'm strongly in support of this. I want to thank Councillor Newton for her patience as we consider this and thrash it out, and all councillors for their contributions.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any other councillors? I'm going to say a few words. I'm actually quite grappling with this issue. I feel it's quite dubious. You can't compare to something like car share. There was something that Councillor Newton triggered something off in reference to mentioning the 86 Festival, which is a festival that we're going to be shutting down most of the streets and people will be walking in the streets. It's a place where there's going to be live music, performances, pubs, clubs and venues and restaurants. Therefore, there'll be a lot of people probably drinking alcohol. Being in the CBD on the weekend, there was at least 12 people I saw and only 2 of them wearing helmets. Now, if people are going to be using scooters, and this is my biggest concern, and I'd like to see in the report that if I do vote on the item, that my biggest concerns is what happens if people are actually drinking and using the e-scooters and not using it appropriately. Who covers the insurance if somebody is killed or injured? I'd like to see that these e-scooters are actually got cameras on them, that they are forceful for people to use helmets and that they are breathalyzed. Because I think that you cannot, this is talking about a unit, not only we're talking about the tenders, I'm sure the e-scooters have a limit of what speed they can have. But if this is a festival that people turn up and they bring their own scooters that can, go at 60 kilometres an hour, if not plus, if it's been enhanced. I know there's a lot of people out there that are quite creative in their little garages and add on some extra speed on their little scooters and put some alcohol and fuel and I guess drug people will do, have no care about what other people. I'm quite concerned. I'm not sure whether e-scooters are at that position in bringing that safety to where we're at the moment. If there are no further speakers, then
Mayor, just a clarification, the maximum speed they can go is 20 kilometres.
Sure, but there's people who have privately own their own scooters, and when you're talking about a festival and if the scooters are going to be out, I don't know how that can be monitored when the privatisation, people bring their own private scooters out with the normal e-scooters and how that's going to be managed. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at it from a safety perspective, and after what I'd seen on the weekend, it sort of concerns me. Yep, my time's up too. I apologise, but it's not often that I get to speak, but it is a concern that I feel. Sorry, you're pointing at the screen.
Because safety is in the report, that's all, Mayor, so that was issued.
As I said, I hope that the safety side of the report actually outlines some of the concerns I have raised in my speech. Councillors, all those in favour in reference to this item? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Our next item and final item I have on this evening for notice of motions is the plant-based treaty from Councillor Newton. Councillor Newton, do we have that item up on the screen?
Yes, and
Just want to
I'd like to
confirm
move
with the amendment.
With the amendment, yeah, I think that's a great addition. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have a seconder before I actually ask councillors for questions? Councillor Hannan is a seconder. So, councillors, questions? Yep, Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
Sorry, I just need to leave the meeting for the moment. I just didn't want to disrupt debate.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillors, do we have any questions in reference to this item? Councillor McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. I have foreshadowed this question, so hopefully it doesn't come as any surprise to officers, but I was just hoping, given there are a number of items that are referred to particularly under C, in relation to action that council can take, but also other actions that are probably picked up as part of this work. If we could just get an indication as to what sort of action council currently has, or commitments currently has, or policies council currently has that may in fact be in this space and may already demonstrate some progress that council's made in relation to some of these items. So how far along are we in relation to this journey, and which would give us an indication as to what else we might wish to do?
Thank you for the question. Vanessa, are you able to answer those questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy, and through you, Mayor Williams. Some of the things that council is already doing in this space, we provide resources to support people's food choices, including providing resources and education. We partner with community gardens and other community groups to host seed libraries to increase the community's access to resources to grow vegetables. We provide ongoing education for home gardeners, and we work with community groups to support community gardens and support establishing new community gardens across the city and also at the Bundoora Park Farm to encourage and promote urban ag and plant-based foods. There are some organisational initiatives, such as when the Ad Hoc Catering Services panel was procured, it sought a selection of vendors that met sustainability criteria and plant-based milk being introduced to tea rooms. And the other area is around our policies and strategies. So Darebin does have a now expired did have an urban food production strategy, 2014 to 18 action plan that sunsetted in 2018, and that did include an action, develop an internal sustainable catering policy, which includes encouraging orders from vendors who source ethically produced seasonal and local food, share and promote the policy with other organisations, but a dedicated sustainable catering policy was not developed. And the revised council plan does refer to food as a part of developing the economic development strategy for year 4. And the current climate emergency plan, 17 to 22, includes an objective as well as related actions to reduce consumption of carbon-intensive foods.
Hopefully that answers your question. Councillor Messina.
Certainly. Thank you, through you, Mayor. Can I ask the question, are you referring to the meat-free Mondays that has been introduced to councillors' room because councillors are vegetarians. Is that what you refer to, Vanessa?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Messina. While I'm aware that sometimes some vegetarian food has been served, I'm sorry, through you, Mayor Williams, apologies. I'm not aware that Council has formally adopted meat-free Mondays, but I'm happy to take that on notice and get back to you.
Thank you. May I ask another question, please, Mayor?
You certainly can.
Sorry, I've just gone blank. Oh, goodness me. Perhaps somebody else can ask a question because I've just gone blank.
I thought I read somewhere in the report that it said there was cancel events also. Does that mean it'll be in the event as in plant-based only, or would it be an option? Option, okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Williams, Council already has an advocacy strategy. It's quite intensive. It was only done last year. Can you please tell me if a plant-based treaty is included in that advocacy strategy?
Thanks for the question. Through you, Mayor Williams, I'm not aware. I'd need to take that on notice for you.
Councillors, are there any other questions in reference to this item before we start the debate? If there were no further questions, I'll over to you, Councillor Newton, as the mover. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Firstly, I'd like to thank Yvonne from Thornbury, who wrote to me recently asking Council to endorse this plant-based treaty. So that's not what we're doing tonight. We're going to receive a report about considering the plant-based treaty, but it's a real positive step in the right direction. So Darebin has a long history of leading on action to create positive change in our society. This includes a ban on single-use plastic items, the strongest anti-pokies policy in the state, the climate emergency declaration, and we're investigating a ban on fossil fuel advertising. Our social and sustainable procurement policy encourages supporting gender equality, local businesses, employment for young people, and environmental outcomes. We were the first city in the world to declare a climate emergency, and in that light, I bring forward the opportunity for Darebin to lead the country on reducing emissions from animals by considering support for the plant-based treaty. Reducing emissions from animal agriculture can play a significant role in reducing our carbon emissions, something Darebin is deeply committed to. Councillors, encouraging residents to eat more sustainably with more vegetables and less meat is the right thing to do and fits very well under our climate emergency declaration. It feels like every day we see news of floods in Hawaii, extreme never-before temperatures and extreme weather events. We must do all we can to reduce emissions, and the time is now. We need to create a carbon-neutral future. We need to encourage plant-based foods from locally grown places such as the Oak Hill Food Justice Farm and the wonderful community gardens such as Regent and Sylvester Hive. I'm 100% sure I'll hear arguments against this motion from councillors, but rest assured, councillors, this motion isn't as scary as you imagine. It's simply about encouraging a more sustainable diet for health, well-being, and our planet. It's been supported in 15 cities across India, 3 in the UK, including Edinburgh, 1 in Turkey and 2 in the US. We have an opportunity tonight to seek a report to be the first city in Australia to sign the treaty, which will confirm our place as leaders on addressing the climate and biodiversity emergencies. We have a growing amount of residents from Indian background residing in Darebin, as well as many longer-term residents whom would already follow a healthy Mediterranean diet, which is largely plant-based. I'm pleased this resolution will also include an equity impact assessment to make sure that we consider cultural, spiritual, health and wellbeing community connections to food. We can also encourage services like Diverse and ensure fruit grown locally goes to those that need it. Personally, I eat a vegetarian diet at home and I do eat red meat occasionally for my iron levels, but I'm very supportive of the councillors in the room who are also vegetarian. The evidence is solid that consuming large quantities of meat is destroying habitat and contributes to the biodiversity emergency, producing various greenhouse gases and contributing to the climate emergency, and it also contributes to non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, stroke, inflammation and cancers. Councillors, you have nothing to fear from increasing our consumption of vegetables, and I implore you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie is the seconder. Would you like to speak on the item? Oh, apologies, I've written the wrong person. My apologies. As the seconder, Councillor Hannon, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Newton again for bringing forward this motion. I would just like to start off by declaring again that we are still in a climate emergency. And as Councillor Newton has said, recent wildfires and heat waves across the world have just underlined how serious the situation is. If it's an emergency, then all options need to be on the table. The world's top scientists, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, have consistently reported that the world needs to reduce its consumption of meat, particularly in relation to land clearing and methane emissions of animal farming, if we are to avoid the destructive impacts of global heating. Throughout history and across cultures, there are many examples of predominantly plant-based diets. It's not necessary for everyone to become fully vegan or vegetarian, but if everyone reduced their consumption of meat, there would be real environmental and health benefits. I'm also predominantly, but not 100% vegetarian, and I can tell you that it has a lot of benefits, and I never look back. The climate emergency is not someone else's problem for some other time. We need action at every level of government and in every business and every household, and we need to start now. This is not a radical proposal. It's not calling for a ban on meat. As we've heard from our staff, it's not actually a big step from what Darebin is already doing, as well as many other councils are doing. It's simply seeking a report and looking at ways. It's quite broadly worded in terms of seeking to explore ways that council can reduce meat consumption and promote plant-based foods directly and indirectly, and I would encourage all councillors to consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard from Councillor Newton, Councillor Hannon. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, Mayor Williams, through you. There's quite a bit of this that I still need to look at. I'm obviously familiar with India's position on promoting plant-based diets as part of international treaties in terms of the impact on gases that add to climate warming, global warming. Now, obviously, there's a lot of detail in that in terms of what percentage of food production adds to it's quite considerable. And then when you break down the actual meat production, the production of meat, that's quite considerable of that 0.25% that's adding from the food sector. So I'm quite supportive of this. I am reminded, again, of the statement by Mahatma Gandhi when India was liberated in 1947. They asked him, do you hope that India will become like England? And he asked, well, if England needed half the world's surface to sustain its lifestyle, how many worlds does India need? And we are now at that point. We need to embrace change. I don't want to demonise anyone. I flip-flop on diets, but of course, it's very important for health of Australians that we increase our consumption of raw, fresh food and vegetables, and that we actually, that's why we're saving the market too, that we actually fight for health and well-being. But people do have options, and I don't want to demonise anyone's dietary choices. And my mother forced us all to turn vegetarian when we were teenagers. It was hard on some, but I accept the right of parents to dictate diet, but anyway.
Councillors, are there any further speakers on this one? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to vote against this particular motion. On Saturday night, I prepared a raw zucchini pasta, made a home-based sauce, and zucchini, I mean zucchini. followed by blood red orange fennel salad sprinkled with pomegranate, prosciutto, figs, buffalo mozzarella. I love vegetables, especially raw ones. I love the circular garden to table process. It's in my genes, and I was brought that way. This is a budget process, not a notice of motion to request a report. This is a council is aware of the budget process. Darebin Council has a success with the Fuse Festival. Can you tell me what mathematical formula? I know it says option, but I don't believe that, because moving forward it'll always be something that's put on the table and will be supported. What mathematical formula will council apply when a food vendor like Gelato Papa wants to register to be a food vendor at a council event? Burnt fig gelato, chocolate, blood orange gelato, plus pistachio gelato. What proportion is vegetable based, and do you refuse them as a vendor on council land? Darebin City Council is a service provider. I received a call from a new business owner who was struggling with navigating customer service. He contacted me. I sent 4 emails almost 1 month later. Again, we are a service provider. We should be focusing on developing a customer service charter, fostering a customer service culture, delivering the council plan, delivering our advocacy policy. We have a budget process. NOMs should not be about new projects, especially in this economic climate. Rather than social engineering political parties' agendas, especially since we have 12 months left and some councillors will use this in the chamber for preparation of the next election, no council should dictate to their community what they should be eating. If anything, we should be advocating for the abandonment of genetically modified food. Because did you know there's extensive researches and links to low fertility rates, and this is what I'm more interested in advocating for, an Australian ban on GMOs, not what we should be eating in our kitchens.
Thank you. Any other further councillors would like to speak on the item for or against? Councillor McCarthy.
Mayor, I wasn't going to speak on this, but I think we just need to reflect on what's actually on screen and what's not on screen. I want to, before I say anything, just recognise that there are some fantastic things on that screen which Council does and has been doing for many years, and I would hope continues to do. One of those is actually doing what we currently do, which is seek to ensure that our events are inclusive of a range of diets. Councillor Lawrence spoke about the challenge that we have as a city and as a nation, and the challenge that Mahatma Gandhi raised, which was actually how do we think about consumption. We're not trying, the whole premise of this motion, and I think the whole question that's before us, is not trying to solve global diet issues. It's actually trying to be inclusive and accommodating, and making sure that when we hold events on council lands that we include options that are actually inclusive in that space, that actually reflect some of those things. Sorry, Councillor Messina, if I can just speak without being interrupted.
Councillor Messina, you've had your chance to speak. Can we allow Councillor McCarthy to speak? Thank you.
This is simply getting our report, and I think that if we were to receive this report, I think what we'll find is that there are a number of things which Council does which actually are not talked about in the same story, and which could be. Then there are some things which Council may say, actually, we're not ready to go there. And I actually fully respect that. I've been a vegetarian since I was 9 years old. That's my choice. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. I've raised a family of meat eaters, okay? So I'm completely failing on the social engineering front, if that's what this is about. What I would say, though, is that organisations that are progressive and forward-thinking are prepared to look at issues like this and understand where there may be opportunities to do things differently. We've got an opportunity to be potentially, I believe, the first city in Australia to take this step. This is just getting a report and exploring whether we should consider it. Council can still say no, and I would just ask us to be a bit brave and
Thank you. Your
get the
time's up.
advice.
Councillors, are there any other councillors who'd like to speak for or against? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Look, in relation to this issue, I'm aware of the plant-based treaty. I'm aware of the some of the cities and some of the countries that are involved in this initiative, and it's commendable in terms of what the treaty is trying to do. From my knowledge in relation to the treaty, it's mainly directed to rural and regional areas, mainly in terms of the production of animal-based foods. In relation to urban centres like us, I'm not sure how much relevance that it could have. Obviously, from an advocacy perspective, it could do that. But look, I just want to remind councillors that here in the city of Darebin, we had the Multicultural Harvest Festival, which was done away, which actually ticks off on a lot of those things. We had the Wine and Food Festival, which has completely been diminished, which actually ticked off on a lot of those things. We have a community here in the city of Darebin, many of them coming from Southern European background, where the diets are very much plant-based diets. And again, we don't pay enough acknowledgement to that. And also, I'd like to point out, councillors, that most recently there's been a high demand on us in terms of actually putting food on people's plates. Some of the agencies have been screaming out to us that people are actually going hungry in terms of, and we haven't done enough advocacy in relation to that. So whilst I acknowledge what this treaty is trying to do, I think as a council we need to direct our attention and our thinking more towards how we can assist people in greater need, people that don't even have the choice of whether they're going to eat plant-based food or meat foods, because some people don't even have enough food to feed themselves on a daily or weekly basis. So I'll be abstaining in relation to this because I think at the moment it will absorb a lot of council resources in pursuing this, where we can better direct our attention to other things.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other councillors? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Having worked in public health for the best part of the last 2 decades, I approach this as much as anything from a health perspective. And we know that diets like the Australian diet, which tend to be quite high in meat, are not as healthy as diets that are higher in vegetables. And so purely from a health point of view, anything we can do as council, as leaders in our community, to promote greater consumption of vegetables would be fantastic. People have mentioned our multicultural communities, and I'm glad they've done so, because we have an opportunity, I think, to honour the knowledge and skills and know-how in those communities and reflect the fact that almost all our migrant communities come from countries where they consume less meat than we do in Australia. So Australians per capita are the 3rd highest consumers of meat in the country, consuming an average of 120 kilos of meat per year. Our Italian friends, those who come from Italy, come from a country where they consume 80 kilos of meat per year. Greek immigrants come from a country where they consume 71 kilos of meat. Macedonian immigrants come from somewhere they eat 36 kilos of meat. And India, as the source of our fastest growing community, consume less than 4 kilos of meat. And so I think that by doing this, we're actually honouring those communities and their know-how, their wisdom about healthier diets, but also about a healthier way of being in the planet. There's actually not a great deal of work here. This council has adopted advocacy positions and asked for reports on advocacy positions on a huge number of things. We've heard that many of these things we already do. Some of them could be done in ways that pick up some of those things that Councillor Greco has talked about in relation to maybe honouring more the food and wine, the harvest festivals, that wisdom held by multicultural communities about healthier ways to eat. And, therefore I encourage everyone to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further councillors who'd like to speak on the item? I think everybody's spoken except for Councillor Demetriadis and myself. No. I feel that the longest living people that have been living on this planet are those who are living and, eating the Mediterranean diet. They're the ones who are living over 100 years old. My concern is that we're talking about adults here, and item number C4 predominantly says that the food options having plant-based only option at council events and meetings. As an adult, I don't like to be told what I can and can't eat. If I feel the need to eat something, I think I'm old enough, mature enough and ugly enough to make my own decisions on what goes in my mouth. I don't tell somebody else that you shouldn't be drinking Coca-Cola, which I know a number of councillors do here, and we know what that does to your stomach and your teeth. But do I put on you what you should be drinking? Yes, we all know the benefits of eating less meat, eating less sugar, but I don't think it's our place to be enforcing that in this arena. And I don't think our officers, I think they've got better things to do with their time, and we have a cancer plan that we should be delivering on at the moment, instead of rushing new reports through at the moment before delivering and finishing our council plan. I'd like to really see that going forward than seeing new reports for our officers to be actually writing up at the moment. I'm going to put that item to vote. All those in favour? I have Councillor Hannan, Councillor Rennie, Councillor Newton, Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Lawrence. All against? I've got Councillor Messina and myself, Councillor Williams. All those abstaining, I've got Councillor Greco and Councillor Demetriadis. That has been carried with the amount of councillors that have voted for it. Thank you, councillors, that has been carried. If there are no urgent business items this evening, CEO? No, there's no urgent business, and there's no other consideration of reports that are confidential that need to be considered. Therefore, I will now close this meeting at 8:57 p.m. Thank you to our officers and councillors and those in the gallery and all the